Start with something small.
Yeah.
I would say, look at the problem statement, what you want to solve. Come up with your security baseline, either pick a service of your choice. Ensure you clearly define those parameters in the security on what those compliance requirements are. So this is a GRC thing, right? We make sure all security settings are mapped to the compliance requirements,
Yes.
the reasons why we are adhering to those things, right? That is step one. The step two is basically, okay, now you have it mapped. How are you monitoring it? So that becomes your monitoring portion of CSPM.
Welcome to Cloud3 podcast. Today we're talking to Santosh about, let's just say, exception management, which is not something I would have thought I'd be talking about. So I'm excited for this conversation to get my own personal opinions challenged. But Santosh, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Could you share a bit about yourself, what your professional journey has been like?
Sure. I was pretty much curious into hacking since childhood. And that was pretty exciting to begin with, because the first time I figured about computer games, basically what I was doing is I was basically not allowed.
Fair.
So basically what I did is did a BIOS crack at a very young age.
You're BIOS cracking. Okay,
Yeah,
wow.
so basically remove the battery and it just works out.
Yeah.
So that was the kind of mindset I had growing up.
Yeah.
So my parents really helped me with there. Pretty much I was having, at early ages in my life, I had access to computers, networks, and all these things. So these were basically becoming my projects. Many projects at home, office, and all of that. So eventually I had my bachelor's in computer science.
Yeah.
And I had a passion towards cybersecurity. I came here, did my master's in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
I worked in CSOC, threat hunting, and all that.
Wow.
Which gave me insights into how exactly cybersecurity works from an attacker perspective.
Yeah.
And also I got an opportunity to work in different kind of roles within cybersecurity, like GRC, compliance, risk management, and all that.
Yeah.
That really gave me another perspective of how everything is coming together.
Yeah.
So currently, with all these experiences and mashup of everything, I really enjoyed my journey throughout in cybersecurity.
Okay.
So currently I am working with Humana.
Yeah.
And that's a world-class team again.
Yeah.
I got the team to be excited about a lot of the innovative work that we do.
Yeah.
So that is the exception management topic you're going to be talking about today.
Fair. And I think it's interesting you've gone through threat management, SOC in yourself, and then the GRC. Maybe to set the context, why is exception management a thing in organizations?
The first thing what I see is exception management has always been a tick mark in the compliance world.
Yep.
So the thing is, I got an exception, but is the exception really monitored? Is the risk still out there? So that is the first thing we basically look into.
Yep.
Because what's going to happen is, you're granting an exception, that exception is not monitored. What that would basically do is you're literally exposing your threat landscape. Right?
Yeah.
So attack surface is growing if you're not monitoring it. You don't know what's going to happen. Once you grant an exception, if it's not monitored properly, attackers can basically take leverage of it. That was like a puzzle that we wanted to solve, really, especially in the cloud space.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the reason why this really was intriguing, solving this problem. So that's pretty much what really got passionate to us, me, basically, to solve some of these things.
It's funny. I think I almost feel, I don't know if you're one of many, or you are many of one in the situation, because a lot of people look at exception management as a human approval thing. I've done something, I want to get past this, especially security. I want to get past security because I want to somehow make this a low risk or a medium risk so I can get past this. That's at least in a lot of the work that I had done, exception management is all about how do I get around security to just lower this? Let's go higher than the security architect. Let's go higher than even that as well. Keep going higher until you get to the exact level or whatever. But you ended up taking this challenge as, hey, I'm going to automate this. Was there something specific that made you feel this? Why do you feel that was possible? Because as I was saying, traditionally this has been looked as a human thing rather than I can automate this.
The first thing what I was seeing is those attacks out there, right?
Yeah.
So if you look into Gartner reports or any of the industry research out there, last couple of weeks, there have been good breaches out there from security perspective. If you look into the configuration, why those are, those are pointing back to the old school things. Basically, storage accounts open to the world, S3s open to the world. All of these configurations are pretty standard security checks. What happens is there is a good legitimate reason why that has to be that way. And that is not monitored, right? It is, again, one of those things, right? Hey, check mark, but is it monitoring? So are we monitoring it? And also the other aspect, what I feel is developers, as they move across the different tools, so there needs to be consistent experience that we basically do in infrastructure as code scanning, cloud native policy, CSPM, when you integrate all these tools together, and if you go through the manual process, you're going to be having exceptions in all these different tools, which developers have to basically go in line to do the deployment. But what's going to happen here is, if you automate all of that, you are basically increasing the productivity. Hey, this is what we do it. But the other problem what we wanted to solve is really come with a standard approach for certified components. For example, hey, you want to deploy A, B, C, and D. Okay, these are the 3 different services. Maybe you might want to deploy storage account, Key Vault, or any of the cloud services. This is a certified component for that. And certified components would be having all security checks in it. So just run with it, use it. And if you have any exception that you want, we always see exceptions as if you're having firewalls or anything like that, you want to deploy virtual machines. Okay, are you just deploying the firewall? Or are you just going beyond the scope of what's approved?
The other thing is also, at least in my mind, the challenge for automation was that there is always a asterisk to Snowflake's exception request, which is there's a point in time, I only needed this today, I would not need this tomorrow, but someone forgets. And there's no, that just obviously could be an exception scenario as well for the exception that we're talking about. But there are so many moving parts. And you almost have not just to your point about the S3 bucket, you want Keycloak, there's not just the cloud components, but the other security components that kind of make the entire application
security.
The security part of the application. With that in mind, was there like a technical challenge you had as you were trying to start this journey? Because where would you even start? That's where the first time I heard you talk about it, I'm like, okay, I don't know, where would you even start? Because most of the conversations, yes, S3 bucket, would that be in a CSPM CNAB? I'm obviously trying to answer this question, but I'd love to hear what your thinking here is.
So the first thing is, at least the role what I am in gave me an opportunity to look into what's in the cloud. We had multiple attempts in the cloud to make it secure. Over a period of like 10 years.
Of course. It's a long enough time for you to know what good, bad, and ugly is.
Yes. If you remember the day the first cloud started, all communications would go through public endpoint, right? Service A and B talks and public one. Then comes the private connect. Right? And then comes the lift and shift. Now it's like containers, right? So we have gone through all those scenarios and we did see risks. So what we have seen is like when we are building this new capability called like 3.0, this is cloud 3.0 kind of thing. So everything has to be as infrastructure as code.
Makes sense.
So that's exactly what is the reason why we also want to automate exceptions so that all the certified components, whatever people want to deploy, it's just available within seconds. They want to basically deploy anything. And at the same time, those exceptions, whatever we grant, we wanted to make sure they are monitored. Because we have learned a lot. We have gone through audits. We have learned a lot. Sometimes there is a deviation from what is getting approved. What's inside the architecture diagram is not necessarily reflecting what's out there. And a lot of these things that we have seen, and with the historic knowledge of other breaches too. So we are a heavily regulated industry, and we want to make sure all the things that we are willing to innovate, we innovate it in a more safe and precise manner. And we also want to unlock developers, for example, to basically test out any capabilities. We wanted to make sure whatever they're testing out in the sandbox environment with the new capabilities is just locked out. They prove the concept, it moves through the certified components like journey, and everything gets baked there.
Actually, because it's interesting that you've gone through the entire journey, because then you have grown a library of exceptions, for lack of a better word. At least you know what to start off with. I'm also curious, with the container world that we're in, I'm going to throw the AI pieces in there as well. A lot of them are built on container workloads and all of that. Does the exception challenge become different between different kinds of compute, like between a virtual machine versus a serverless function versus a container? And these days, if you go with Amazon, I think Amazon recommends you to have AI agents or whatever as serverless components. That's what they promote. GCP has their own version. Azure has their own version. But predominantly, most people are still containerized. So between these computes, is the way exceptions being handled, is that different in terms of automation?
It's pretty similar. Because all of the way we look at it is like all of these services do have some configuration settings baked inside them. If you're deviating from a secure configuration, then that's an exception. A solid example for that is for virtual machines. If you're trying to deploy a approved image, that's fine. That's not an exception. But if you are going beyond the scope, maybe we always see this with firewalls, right? There is a specific vendor image that you'll have to pull, and that's going to be an exception. And we are going to be automating it inside all the life cycles so that basically whatever the exception that we grant basically applies consistently across all the tools which are in line. infrastructure as code scanning, cloud native policies, for example, Azure policies, Google Arc policies, AWS SCPs, and from the monitoring side, any kind of CSPM tools that we have.
Oh, so it's multi-cloud as well?
Yes.
Wait, so okay, let's take a step back then. Is the automation part you're referring to, is that more using policy as code across multiple cloud providers for against compute, but based on your security policy?
That's right. So the first thing that we did is, again, we did go through multi-cloud approach.
Yep.
And we had to basically come up with a standard security baseline. No matter what, this is going to be a security baseline. And this security baseline will really help us to drive compliance with industry best practices, where we have to demonstrate all of these things for compliance and legal requirements kind of stuff. But at the same time, what we do is we take those, make it policy as code, deploy it, so that it basically gets deployed across all the platforms. And the only missing part was exceptions.
Fair.
And that we really solved that problem with automating the exceptions in the cloud. And the way I look at it is like you can pretty much scale it to any tool, because it's at the end, you're basically having an orchestration layer, which basically looks at all the events coming from these different platforms and basically triggers a function, just goes and applies an exception.
Interesting. I'm fascinated by this because of the possibility here, but at the same time, does that mean you had to create a library of policies and ISC as code to what you were saying earlier as well as a GRC team? Where does anyone start? Because I imagine a lot of people in GRC, especially GRC who are listening or watching this conversation, they go, I don't know, man, Santosh is already technical. He's come from SOC and threat detection. That's why he could do this. Do you need to have that background to be able to start building this themselves? Because obviously you have had years of cloud presence, quote unquote, to build that library. But a lot of people would be listening, watching this. I'm going to start this today because of Santosh, that made sense. It says already APIs. Where does one, I guess, what's a good starting point is what I'm trying to get to?
I mean, start with something small. I would say, look at the problem statement, what you want to solve too. So the easiest thing is come up with your security baseline, either pick a service of your choice. Ensure you clearly define those parameters in the security on what those compliance requirements are. So this is a GRC thing, right? We make sure all security settings are mapped to the compliance requirements, the reasons why we are adhering to those things, right? So that is step one. The step two is basically, okay, now you have it mapped. How are you monitoring it? So that becomes your monitoring portion of CSPM. Ensure like all the policies are linked properly in the CSPM to perform the monitoring. Now, once you have the monitoring, you have an understanding of, okay, what is exactly the issue here, right? So you understand the compliance, right, portion of it. So once you know the issue, at that point of time, it becomes either a pattern. For example, it's a developer thing. Hey, this is how it should look like. No. Or is it more, hey, this is an issue. We don't have a control for, then we need to solve it. That's exactly where you start implementing infrastructure as code scanning, cloud native policies, and all these things together. But once you start implementing more and more tools in your pipeline, those tools should also scale to some of the operational needs. So that's exactly another place where you can start like your next approach to basically say, okay, now I have all these tools. I need to have a centralized database or something. I map all the policies which are in line from shift left to shift right. And anytime when something changes from a configuration perspective, right, or exception perspective, I track them here and I automate it. So that it's at the end of the day, cloud gives you an opportunity to work with APIs, SDKs, and any tools out there come pretty standard nowadays with those things. So it's basically utilizing them and basically triggering an automation to basically go apply that exception. And the other portion of it is like continuous monitoring, because this is the key, right? Granting an exception is one portion of it. Continuous monitoring is a must. Because continuous monitoring will give you that visibility into saying, hey, this is what you granted for, and this is exactly what it is. Because what we see here in GRC terminology is control self-assessment. So that is done on a yearly or 6 months basis. Right? It's basically you're going to control owner asking him, just checking mark, hey, these are things that we are solving, yes, and okay, to the best of your knowledge, this is how exactly the control works. But on this side, the flip side, this automation really ensures, hey, continue. There is someone watching you, right? So it's just you are driving a car, you know the rules, you have like license and everything. You still have a cop sometimes who basically would check, hey, are you still abiding the rules or how are you following it? So that's exactly what I see like with compliance going on with this automation.
That's pretty cool because actually Once you start building the database, what have you found as a good place to, we just store in the policies and GitHub or GitLab or whatever your repository tool is? Because you mentioned the example of a storage account being open on the internet. I'm sure there are other examples. Different regulatory standards may have different examples. And you have to mention, you guys have regulatory standards as well. Sometimes it could be as simple as using it should be encrypted everywhere as a baseline.
Yeah.
Because I imagine a lot of people get stopped at the baseline part where, oh, that's the harder part. Like, I don't know where to start, what standard to follow. Have you found any standards that were helpful apart from, say, just going, I'm going to go PCI or would you recommend them to go straight to PCI or whatever the standard instead of using a CIS or something else?
Depends on what you're trying to solve, right? And which industry you're in.
Yep.
Every industry has its own pattern. For example, we have HIPAA, high trust, and all those things that will have to comply to.
Yep.
And the same thing if you have credit card or any of the transactions going through PCI, DSS again.
Yep.
So it's a combination of all those things. So the better place to start is understand your compliance requirements, needs from a regulatory perspective. And then basically a lot of these things have one thing in common is they overlap on some of these things. I see GRC tools coming up with some automation there, which will really help you to understand, what exactly is the requirement.
Yep.
And those requirements would flow to an architectural blueprint.
Okay.
Hey, this is a service I want to provision. Hey, this is a security setting, how it looks like. Maybe a storage account you're using, ensure you're doing private connect.
Yep.
Ensure you're ensuring like your identity and access management is secured.
Yep.
All of that.
Yep.
So once you have all of those kind of standard practices defined in the blueprint, so now that's a derivative from the policy to basically say, hey, from the enterprise policy to basically say, we need to follow the blueprint so that we can start creating certified components from those blueprints. So these are nothing but your Terraform templates or any of that. People can basically use it because those are certified components so that at any time when enterprise would like to pull applications or deploy applications, they can basically deploy them by using certified components because A, you're enabling scale because developers don't have to write IAC code. And two, those certified templates are periodically reviewed every time when they run for the security kind of configuration in the pipeline to say, are they still valid or do we have any additional checks coming in?
Yep.
And also that is going to really help us understanding like, okay, if there's any deviation, we really have to fix in the IAC so that developers can basically start consuming and using it.
This makes me feel, what's a good metrics to measure this? Because to your point, people start working on it. They'll get to a point where I have a baseline now because I was advised by Santosh that, hey, a great recommendation is to make sure you have a baseline, which kind of makes sense depending on the compliance standards you have. Now I'll start building a policy library of some sort. As you start applying that to do exception management using policies like your cloud-native policy management tools, which or whatever the cloud provider may be, Azure, AWS, GCP, doesn't really matter. Now, at a certain point, there's always ISO 27001 may change, or there's another change coming to whatever policy because AI is here or whatever, or we have a new compliance standard because of AI. I imagine the journey is to start again from what's the common baseline to what you just mentioned, and then start from where the exceptions are and what can be automated. In terms of retiring some of those exceptions, how I get the point of, hey, let's do a point-in-time self-control assessment where you figured out, okay, every year I do one or every 6 months I do one. How does one know what's a good time to retire a control? Because I imagine there's preventative controls. You hear so much about it. So what's your strategy for the life cycle of this exception management?
Yeah, I think when I look at retiring a control, right, it all drives by the business decision around what's the service and what's the business like impact. Right?
Yep.
What's the business value we are driving through a service? So, for example, we might be using certain services. Now, I'm going to give you an example. We use functions in the cloud. We use different web apps in the cloud.
Yep.
Now, if you're moving towards a strategic approach saying, yeah, I'm going to use containers. So then that becomes a point in time where you're saying, okay, now the strategy is to really move to containers. Eventually, at some point of time, we're going to be retiring those controls.
That's right.
Yeah. So once those controls are retired, at least what I've seen in my professional journey so far is controls never get retired. And
they just stay there, yes.
They just add to the complexity. So I hear this all the time. We start like building cloud. We go left and right, start scaling left and right. And it's going to be a sprawl.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there is always a few services which you really can't retire. So at that point of time, that decision of like policy retirement and all that is something I've not seen so far in my journey. Like getting retired. And what I've seen more and more is like they're getting out of control.
Which is the reality of the situation as well, because to your point, we had this scenario where I think we wanted to shut down an application or whatever. It was supposed to be retired, but there was such a, what if we needed tomorrow?
Yes.
What if we needed like in 6 months' time? Let's just not completely switch it off. Maybe reduce the resources on it.
Yes.
So it doesn't cost as much. And it's a very hard call to make, especially if an organization has been in existence for a long time.
Yes.
It's a hard call to make. Another thing with the exception handling then, what would you say is different levels of maturity that people can use to measure? Obviously, you've had years of doing this, to build the library, build the baseline, all of that. For people who are trying to figure out, hey, what are different stages that I can think maturity can be? What's a good baseline that people should start with? What can they move from, hey, once you're here, this is the next stage, then you're really good. I'm sure there's an advanced stage as well.
Yeah.
How do you measure what's a good maturity to aim for people?
Yeah, I think the first thing is understanding what you have. That comes with a CSPM, like overall understanding of, hey, the cloud posture. I've seen use cases where CSPM was not completely adopted to some of the isolated flows in the organization.
Okay.
So just make sure that tool gets completely deployed and has
coverage is there.
Coverage.
Yeah.
Coverage is a key aspect of it because that's going to help you to drive the approach.
Right. Makes sense.
So the first thing what I would start is cloud native policies are the key. So the cloud native policies, if you have them, they will start preventing misconfigurations moving forward. So at least that's the maturity level 1 we have to aim to. At least moving forward, no more drifts. If there are drifts, then probably existing drifts, that how do I need to fix it? Because runtime remediation is so expensive because I've seen use cases where we try to make changes, it's going to be a downtime and things like that, and ending up being an issues. So it's always good to have those issues fixed during the IAC time itself, so that we let them know, hey, just fix this code. Once you have this base level of maturity, now the next level is really coming up with certified components, so that you can basically scale across the enterprise. Hey, I need a service. Hey, okay, this is a certified component for that, right? Just go for that, use it. And this is a blessed thing from security. You don't have to go through security. Again, the goal really is to enablement, right? Ensure developers move fast. The thing is, like, you move fast, break fast, learn from it, right? So that's the approach that we take. And the more and more assessments that you'll have to go through from security perspective, the more lead time, right? So with this kind of whole approach of certified components, we are pivoting away from, hey, these are the certified components. These are already security architecture reviewed, right? And you can just go and deploy. Just make sure the solution is just compliant with A, B, C, and D, which you're stating in your architectural statement. So that's the game of cloud security, with a combination of cloud native policies as like your phase 1. And eventually you're going to be starting doing CSPM remediations once you're in that mature state to basically start remediating your existing resources. And also what I see another gap here is this only solves like 90% of the use case. You still have 10% of the use case where there's a SaaS product, or you have vendor-to-vendor integration. Maybe you're doing a backups. Maybe your backup vendor basically connects to your cloud. It kind of like creates few things on behalf of them. So their provisioning also has to be compliant with your internal security standards. If not, it's going to be failed. So having conversations around what's the requirements and how this has to be done, that's really going to raise a bar. And that's really going to help in the overall maturity.
So, yes, I think they didn't even think about SaaS components that are already plugged into your cloud environment. Okay, fair. Maybe the question then, now that we understand the maturity, where to start as well, going back to the whole skill set of, do people need to be engineering heavy, or was there engineering playing any role in this? Because I think as much as I would like to believe, because you're technically yourself, so it's a bit different. A lot of people would not be comfortable just to go, hey, I don't know if my auditor would allow for this. Auditor may just go, what is this? What is this SCP thing that I'm looking at? You would just show me the damn screenshot of what I need to look at, and it needs to be a screenshot from this week or today, or can you just point it where it is? So how did you manage that? Or are you finding that auditors are getting more mature, that they are okay to have a CSPM CNAP alert as, hey, yep, okay, you're monitoring this, I can see that, and I have not seen an exception, so I'm happy that this is a good control that you're keeping?
I think that's a happy medium, I would say.
All right, okay, happy medium, fair. So it's a work in progress.
Work in progress, it's an happy medium. And again, yes, people are comfortable looking at the evidence of what we have. And at the same time, we are able to satisfy some of the requirements too. So that's really key in terms of monitoring some of these capabilities. And the other aspect, what I see is AI a lot of these things are coming out.
Yeah.
Ensuring they're deployed in a proper format, both for unlocking business is really critical. And even we've seen being a cloud-first company and a lot of AI things going around from, hey, what do we make? How do we make Humana as into health insurance? And we usually try to make the experience like seamless, right?
Yep.
So one of the things that we try to do is, okay, we try to innovate a lot of stuff with security in mind. That's like a good thing. And again, I'm not seeing many organizations doing it, but at least a few are currently doing it. So having security baked inside the product design, start with the threat model, start your analysis there, understand what the threats are, start predicting it, and your AI just becomes a normal product. It's not really, it's a product again. If you look into DevSecOps of these things 10 years back, these were all the new products and tools, and that's how we see AI too. It's just like a kick to existing developers, just increasing productivity and just deploying it in a safe and secure manner, consistent with the guardrails that you put in. And your exception basically becomes like your overarching governance, which basically checks and validates every time when there is a configuration drift. What exactly it is. Is it something approved or not? If it's something not approved, then it's immediately going to send us an alert. If there is a deviation from it, then what's approved, then that's really going to help us in closing the loop with the people who are trying to deploy it and saying, hey, why did this go in the first place?
And I think you're able to get to it before it does a runtime problem.
Yes.
Fair. Those are most of the technical questions I had. I've got a few fun questions for you as well, man. First one being, what do you spend most of your time on when you're not trying to solve exception handling with automation?
Home automation.
Really? You're doing home automation? Just walk in, lights turn on?
Yes, I'm a big home automation guy. I use Home Assistant with combination of different tools out there. So I like playing around, spending my time with kids, and also just working on automation projects. So that really keeps me passionate.
Interesting. Wait, what? I was going to ask, what happens if you can't unlock your door? But I guess you don't have it in your door. You still use a manual key. Yeah. I'm like, you were able to get in your house to do the automation. Fair. Okay. Second question, what is something that you're proud of that is not on your social media?
So I think the one thing that I would say is family, right? Family first. At the same time, having a happy medium for both work and for family, innovating stuff. Balancing it out. That's a key.
That is a difficult one to keep maintaining as well. So definitely something to be proud of. Third and the final one, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share?
I'm mostly into Indian food and sometimes a little bit of Mediterranean kind of style.
Oh, what kind of Mediterranean? Kebabs?
Kebabs, yeah. Kebabs, salads.
Oh, yeah, fair. The Mediterranean salads are pretty amazing. Favorite Indian food?
I eat everything in India.
Wait, if you only had one to pick, what would it be?
Tandoori items.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's a good one to pick for.
Yeah.
Where can people find you on the internet if they wanted to connect with you and talk more about? I imagine a lot of GRC people would definitely be curious about how are you doing this? Tell me your secret. Is there a GitHub repository somewhere that I can copy paste? Where can people find you on the internet to connect?
So I'm on LinkedIn. So you can hit me on LinkedIn. That's the most proactive I am in.
Oh,
and I do participate in Cloud Security Alliance circles, ISACA circles, and IC Square ones. If you ever see me, just say hi. Happy to discuss this further.
Awesome. I'll leave your LinkedIn link as well. But dude, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time. Peace. Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode of Cloud Security Podcast. If you've been enjoying content like this, you can find more episodes like these on www.cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. We are also publishing these episodes on social media as well, so you can definitely find these episodes there. Oh, by the way, just in case there was interest in learning about AI cybersecurity, we also have a sister podcast called AI Cybersecurity Podcast, which may be of interest as well. I'll leave the links in the description for you to check them out. And also for our weekly newsletter, where we do in-depth analysis of different topics within cloud security, ranging from identity, endpoint, all the way up to what is the CNAP or whatever a new acronym that comes out tomorrow. Thank you so much for supporting, listening, and watching. I'll see you next time.